and let's pour. Hey everybody, it's Anna. Welcome back to my Fluid Art channel, and thank you so much for stopping by. Today I'm making 4 little paintings in Christmas colors, and I have a new tool that I'm going to be trying out. This is something that I just got. This is from a brand called Resiners. This is the AirLess Lite, and this is a machine for reducing bubbles. It's designed for use in resin, but I thought, what about paint? Because fluid painters, a lot of times you go, there's all those air bubbles in my paint and it's making those little like pinhole cells that I don't really want. And I thought, I wonder if this would work on something that's a little bit thicker than resin. So I'm going to give it a shot today. So what I have is I have 4 little canvases. These are 6x6 Daler-Rowney deep canvases that I got, I think, from Walmart. So what I'm actually doing kind of a comparison 2 different ways. So these 3 colors, green, white, and gold, I have mixed with Floetrol. It's 1 part paint to 2 parts Floetrol, thinned with water until we have about a medium consistency. It flows nicely. It stacks up, it makes a mound. I didn't want to go really, really thin because I want to see whether this thing can deal with paint that isn't like Dutch pour consistency. So medium to medium thin, but it's really more of a medium consistency. Over here, I've mixed these 3 with glue. So rather than making a pouring medium out of glue and water and then mixing that with my paints, I just started by mixing my paint about 1-to-1 with Elmer's Glue All, and then I thinned it with water. Now this is a little bit thicker actually than this. I tried to have them pretty similar, but the glue side ended up a bit thicker. It flows very nicely, which is beautiful, but as you stir it, it just feels heavier. So this is a medium to a medium thick consistency. The reason I did 2 different mixtures is because I'm going to be doing a ribbon pour out of a split cup, and Floetrol is a more reactive pouring medium. Glue is not very reactive. So I wanted to see what the difference would be in terms of nice, clean stripes of color between glue and Floetrol. So that's the first comparison. This is slightly thinner than this, which means this will react slightly more than that. But I just want to give you a feel for what the 2 different mediums will do. But then also, between each of these, I'm going to do one of them using freshly mixed paint. I don't know if you can see on camera, there are so many air bubbles in this paint. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to pour some into little cups, and I'm going to remove the bubbles out of half of it. So one's going to be full bubbles, one's going to be hopefully reduced or no bubbles. So there'll be full bubbles Floetrol, full bubbles glue, no bubbles Floetrol, no bubbles glue. Does that make sense? Whew, talking in circles. 2 sets of mixing, but half of each is going to be reduction of bubbles. And I think that's all I need to talk about. Let's make some paintings. I'm going to start with the Floetrol mixed paint because that is what I use most often, and that's what you see me use most often, so that's going to be kind of my control group. So I'm going to pour about half of the paint in here of each color. That way we know it's exactly the same paint, same number of air bubbles and all of that. Okay, that looks about half. And half of the white, and half of the gold. So I started out with about 4.5 ounces of each color because I knew that I'd want 5 to 6 ounces for each canvas because the sides are so big. And sometimes you can be using a split cup is not the most efficient in terms of paint usage because there's a lot of edges for the paint to get stuck on, and you can't like scrape it out like you can with a regular cup. Anyway, I think I have plenty. There's about 2 ounces of each of these. I'm going to put all 3 of these in here. It's designed to put 1 cup of resin in, but these are small cups of paint, so I'm putting all 3 of those in. Then the top goes on. It just sits on there. Plugs in. Where's the plug? There's the plug. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it on. Okay, so it is like a vacuum essentially. It creates a vacuum to suck those air bubbles out of the paint. So it makes some noise, but it's not really loud. And while this is going, I'm going to leave that for about 10 minutes. And I really should have some kind of timepiece, but I don't. So we're going to estimate. I'm just going to do my other pour, and then we'll get this out and see how it works. So for my beginning canvas, I've got my little silicone 3-color split cup from Let's Resin, and I think I'm going to put the gold in the middle. Oh, this is cool. So I'm looking at the looking inside here, and I can see air bubbles rising to the surface. Because the paint is not clear and the cups are not clear, I can't see the bubbles like from deep down, but the top is kind of bubbling. It almost looks like something baking. Oh, that's cool. Though, I'm going to pause that for a second because the gold, there's so many bubbles rising, it's fluffing up and it's about to actually overflow the cup. So I'm just going to let it sit for a minute and let some of those bubbles pop before I turn it back on. But it is definitely working. That's super cool. All right, back to this. Gold in the middle. Do white on this side. The gold is definitely spilling over the side here. So what I'm going to do, what am I going to do? Well, no, the bubbles are popping. Oh, it's funny. It's like a yeasted dough that's getting too big. I kind of want to just sit here and watch it. So the paint will spill in there. It'll be okay. We'll let some pop. As the paint levels go down, I'll turn the vacuum back on again. In terms of what design I'm going to make, I don't really know. I've thought about, just some really straight lines back and forth. I've thought about kind of spiraling. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Let me turn this around so you can see what the gold is doing. Do you see that? That's crazy. Fluffy paint. Okay. We'll let that sit for a minute. Actually, let me try something. So there's a little valve here. A seal. Whoa. Okay. I was going to open that up, and if it was still fluffy, I was going to torch those air bubbles. But it's collapsed, so let me just see whether quickly torching these. No, there's not a lot on the surface. All right, let me just try it again. Get that seal. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. For this, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do diagonal lines. I don't know if I want to do swooping. I don't know if I'm going to be wrecking this design. I might do that. I might feather it. So what I want to do, I'm going to turn this for the ease of my hand so that I can do nice straight lines this way. And then I'll run a skewer through it to make a feathered design. Okay, a little bit more up here because it's not very gold up here. Very green. Okay. We'll straighten that out for you now. So I can see bubbles in here, of course, because there were lots of bubbles in the paint. Before I pop them, where's my skewer? I think I'm missing my official skewer, so I'm just going to use this paintbrush, and I'm going to drag it through, some going up and some going down. Though before I actually make the design, I'm going to tip a little bit off this side. I'll show you what I'm doing, just to get it a bit stretched over the side. Okay, and same on this side. That way it should start to flow a bit. I'm also not seeing the same fluffing happening over here, so not sure exactly what's happening there. I'm going to cover my corners a bit, just so that there's something on them. I might stretch this a little bit after I do the feathering, but I want it to be relatively well covered ahead of time. Let's do some feathering. So if you've never done it, feathering is very easy. You start by pulling your stick one direction, and I'm actually going to do all of the ones that direction first. And then, once you've gone that way, then you pull the other direction. This is so cool. I think the next one I'm going to do diagonally. Same pattern, but a diagonal layering of the lines and a diagonal feathering. Very, very cool. I like that design. I think the sides are pretty much, oh, no, definitely not up here. Not covered up here. And the sides will continue to drip a bit, and I may do something with them after the fact, but sides are covered. Now it's time to torch, because all of those little air bubbles, I want to pop those bubbles. Okay, there were a lot, and I'm seeing some little cells from those, which is what I expected. Certainly along the sides, there's a lot of those little air bubble cells. So now, not sure how these are doing, but I'm going to move this one to the side, get ready with my next canvas. Yeah, let's go ahead and open this up. Not sure if it's been 10 minutes. They recommend 10 minutes, but I can't see what's going on. Oh. I don't know that that was working much at all that second time, because it didn't make a big noise when I opened that thing. Let me try it again. It might not have been working that second time around. Okay. Now it's working. Now I can see the bubbles actively rising to the surface and popping. So I'm going to speed this up for you, and we'll come back in a few minutes when the bubbles have all popped and we're ready to pour this next one. Alright, this is getting a little messy, so I'm going to turn it off again. Wow. That's crazy. I'm going to reset really quickly. Rather than doing the Floetrol paint right after this one, because I'm not quite ready for that, I'm going to jump into the glue. Now, about this, the instructions do say, don't fill your cup too high. They say about half full is best. So I had mine about 2/3 full. I think that's too full. So what I'm going to do for the glue mixed paints is I'm going to put the larger cups, the 5-ounce cups in there instead of the 3-ounce cups. But instead of separating them into smaller cups to put it in there, and then pouring from the large cups onto here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer my split cup straight from the big cups, and then I'll put the big cups right in there. That way there will be more space in the cup. We're going to have white in between the green and red. Okay, so now what we have left over is about half a cup of paint, which I think will work much better in here, and we won't get that same dramatic bubbling over of the colors. So the extra glue paint is going in here, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did before. I'm going to pop that on, make sure my vent is closed, and turn it on. So for this one, the one that's got the bubbles, I'm going to keep it consistent with this. The bubbles will be the straight, and the diagonal is going to be the reduced bubbles. So I'm going to turn it for ease of my hands, and let's pour. Great. I can see the bubbles coming up over here, but it looks like we have plenty of space in the cup to let that happen, so that should be fine. So let me do a quick tilt to get our edges covered. Alright, I think this is looking pretty good, except I messed up my line right there. Alright, I'm gonna just pour a couple. Just get everything covered there. I think I underestimated how many paper towels this was going to take. Whew! It's a messy one. So I'm looking at these bubbles, and it's crazy because they've fluffed right up, but they haven't actually popped. They are popping really slowly. Time to do the feathering again, so I'm gonna do it pretty much the same as before. Obviously red and green turn to mud, so I'm just trying not to blend the colors too much. And let's go the other way. Beautiful. I love that feather design. It makes it look so elegant, and it's really easy. I'll work on the edges later. I think they're okay for right now, so I'm going to set that one up kind of with that one. Right there, that's a nice pair. The feathers of different colors. Oh, I forgot to torch. Okay, we had a lot of air bubbles there. A lot of little tiny cells, which you will see when we do the close-up, because I moved it out of the good the good angle. All right, so once again, the bubbles have all risen to the surface, but they're not really popping. So let's look at our Floetrol cups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these into the larger cups, but only keep it about half full so they don't overflow. Let's turn this off. Open that up. It is fun watching the paint deflate. So we had some of the red leak, spill over the side. Let me just look at these really quick, because clearly they still have plenty of air bubbles in them. I don't know. The glue might be a problem with this. It might be too thick or too sticky or something, and not want to pop those air bubbles. But I will go ahead and put these Floetrol paints in, because I was watching the bubbles pop in here, and I think just being in a bigger cup, I think this is going to work. All right, let's do it. Whoops, I forgot to close the vent, which means it's not going to work very well. There we go. It's definitely better with the bigger cups because it isn't spilling. The bubbles are popping. So I'm going to let this keep working for another few minutes. I'm going to tweak the edges of this red one because I don't love how the edges look. And when this looks relatively bubble free, we'll do the next green and gold one. So I keep waiting for like all the bubbles to pop and then it to be nice and like smooth on the surface, and it isn't that yet. The bubbles do continue to pop, it's just slow. And I think it's because my paint is on the thicker side, it's not really thin. Probably with a Dutch pour paint where it's very liquidy, I bet this process would go much more quickly. Let me go ahead and stop it. Okay, it didn't deflate that far. I think that's a good sign that the level of paint with the bubbles up there is not way higher than with the bubbles. So you can see those bubbles in there, right? I'm seeing if banging can get rid of some of them. Okay, that's popping some. Or torching. Okay, that's getting rid of some. Okay, let me check the next cup. Those ones are not wanting to pop. Okay, so these are not bubble free. They probably have less bubbles than the fresh mixed paint was. I can't decide whether I go ahead and paint the other two canvases using the paint that still has bubbles in it, or whether I let those bubbles rise out on their own. I don't mind how this looks with the air bubble cells, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and paint. So we're going to start with the green, white, and gold. And I think I had gold in the middle. Okay, as I'm pouring this out, the bubbles were pretty much all at the top of the cup. And as it gets further down in the cup, there were a lot less bubbles. So the thing is working for sure. I just wasn't patient enough to let it get every single bubble out of there. But I think it's going to have a lot less bubbles than the first set did. And same with the green. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to keep my canvas like this, and I'm going to pour it in diagonals. I just want to make sure my lines are pretty much good before I cover the whole thing. Now, as I'm pouring this out, I'm noticing a lot less bubbles. It is a much smoother pour than what it had been before. So I think we were at least somewhat successful there with the airless. Let me stretch it just a little bit to get all those edges kind of covered and kind of end up going with the direction of your paint. Getting the bare spots covered early so that then the paint can continue to drip while there's still some paint moving down. Then what's dripping will make a more seamless look than if you cover your canvas way at the end. My hands are so messy My table is so messy. You know that usually I try to keep a fairly neat table, pretty clean hands. Not today. Turning this so I can do the feathering. When you feather, you want your lines to be far enough apart that you're not going to bump into the other lines, but also close enough together that the lines in between look like a nice curve. If your feathered lines are too far apart, then it's going to look like, instead of like a really nice swoop in between. Alright, that looks really pretty. Time to torch. Definitely seeing less air bubbles, but there are a few. There's definitely less than in this one. There's significantly less, but there are still a few. Alright, let's paint the last one. So these cups, which had been in there, hadn't popped all the bubbles. I tapped them. A lot of those bubbles kind of rose to the surface and popped. So I have a feeling there's going to be less bubbles in these paints than were in the first set. But let's give it a go. Oh my, there's still a lot of air bubbles. Oh well. It is going to be okay. Because even the first one looked really cool. So we'll just do this one in 2 patterns. And who cares about the little air bubble cells? Alright, once again, I'm going to do this one diagonally. I really like how it looked with the green one. Well, just ran out of battery on my forward camera, but that's going to be okay. Alright, let's go ahead and spread this out a little bit. So first of all, we just want to get some going down over all the edges so that it'll cover the sides. They're very warped. So I'm just going to go straight down this way. Try to get rid of some of that wiggle. And then back this way. Well, that is not the prettiest. I think it'll look better once I do some feathering on it, though. Whew. Okay. Feathering on that one is done. I'm going to give it a torch, see what kind of air bubbles we can pull up. Okay, there were a lot of air bubbles in that. I'm done! Whew, this has been a very long process. Let me give you a close-up of all 4 pieces. Okay, close-up time. So let's start with, this is the first one I did. So this is the Floetrol mixed paint that had the full bubbles. So you can see there's a lot of those little speckles. That's what happens when you have fresh mixed paint with a lot of bubbles in it. This was the reduced bubble mixture, but as you can see there were still bubbles in it because I didn't let the machine run super long. Now here's an interesting section right there. Do you see there's kind of a texture? That's an interaction, not air bubbles. That's something that you often get with Floetrol in your paint. So we won't see that in the glue mixture. So this was our first glue one. As you can see, lots of air bubbles, little tiny ones. But those colors are so crisp and clean. Glue does not interact as much one paint to another, so if you want a really clean ring pour or something, a glue mixture might be what you need. And then this one was the last one, which was supposed to be reduced bubbles, but we didn't let it go long enough, or the mixture was too thick, or something, because there's still lots of bubbles in there, but I like the diagonal. So I'll show you how these paintings look when they're dry. Okay, the paintings are dry. So first of all, I love how shiny the gold is in this one. The metallic is just beautiful. I love using metallics. So they both dried really well, both sets. So first let's have the comparison between Floetrol and glue. So the Floetrol, you can see the texture of the canvas there. It's generally a thinner layer. Glue is a much thicker, shinier layer. You can see there's a ton of those little like pinprick holes from the air bubbles that were still in the paint and did not pop while the paint was wet. So those popped as the paint was drying. We didn't have any of those in the Floetrol. That's one of the reasons why I like mixing my paint with Floetrol, because you don't have that same textural issue as your painting dries. And the same is true down here. We had those, you see the texture of the holes, whereas on the Floetrol side we did not. So just in terms of a pouring medium comparison, this is why I usually go with Floetrol instead of glue. And for both of these, our colors stayed nice and clean, but that was because we were using a split cup and a ribbon pour, and so it wasn't a technique where the colors really wanted to blend. So glue, I think, generally is better for a ring pour or something where you want to keep nice clean layers, and that certainly happened here. But with the split cup and the ribbon pour, we kept clean layers with the Floetrol as well. So the sides of the canvases are a little bit messy. Maybe the deep canvases wasn't the best choice for this technique. So I may just brush paint the sides a solid color like green. That might end up looking nice to be kind of like a frame. I haven't decided. But overall, we definitely have less bubbles in this second painting with the Floetrol. There are still some of those little air bubble cells, but not as many as in the first one. So our AirLess Lite air bubble reducer machine from Resiners, it really worked on the Floetrol paint. With the glue, it did not work as well, I think partly because the paint was thicker, possibly because the glue itself makes for a kind of a stickier mixture where the bubbles are harder to pop. I'm not sure. So I didn't have great success with that medium, but I think for paints that aren't too thick, especially like a Dutch pour consistency, or mixed with Floetrol as the pouring medium, or certainly for resin, because that's what this is designed for, I think this machine would be a really great tool to have if you are trying to reduce air bubbles in your paint. Thanks for sticking with me through this long comparison of pouring mediums and test of this new tool. I hope it gave you some ideas and inspired you to try something new. I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!